Afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Halo Love and Country. I'm Richard Gayton, psychologist, filmmaker, writer, um, jack of many trades. And, uh, and Mitch McDonald is here with us. Mitch, why don't you introduce yourself? Come on.
Oh, you see, you can't embarrass me enough by introducing me yourself. You got to make me do it.
Absolutely.
Ah,
Okay, I'm gonna
um,
okay,
Mitch
I'm gonna talk about him
McDonald.
first. I'm gonna talk about him first. So this guy is an amazing actor, wonderful actor in Love and Country, the movie, which is on Tubi. I can give a promo for that. He plays a first sergeant in there, and he's amazing. So go see that. He's also is available for other acting roles. He's a producer. He's a filmmaker, and he's teaches kids. And now, what would you like to say about it, Mitch?
Oh, yeah, you vastly oversold that, but I appreciate the positivity. Um, yes, writer, actor. Yeah, you covered the meat.
So, Love and Country has been about taking risks, about LGBTQ people taking risks in the military. It became, and we interviewed several people. It has become about the risk of being an American citizen in America now and speaking out. As we are watching the erosion of many of our democratic institutions by our current administration. And I was wanting our meeting today to be about how do we cope with that with a an administration that tends to violate the law, push the limits, violate the limits of the presidency, engage in, I want to say, unprecedented corruption, but I don't know about that. I don't know how bad the corruption really got in the past, but it's gotten pretty bad now. And my experience of this is a sense of loss of what happened to our democracy with the new administration coming in, with a sense of that being victimized by a system, although nothing has really happened to me. I'm not I'm not in the crosshairs. Maybe I will be. And that's one of the issues is if you haven't been in the crosshairs, that doesn't mean you won't be. We've seen the most recent example. I don't know if there is no recent example because corruption seems to be a constant theme of this administration. So when you just begin to react to the great big beautiful bill, we get the great big beautiful ballroom, and if we don't have the great big beautiful ballroom, we have the killing of people in Minneapolis. If we don't, it's always something, and it's always something new. Then we have the war. We didn't even talk. I mean, it's so as the Republicans have talked about, they're flooding the zone, and Trump is particularly good at that, coming up with multiple crises, and constantly introducing new threats, new initiatives that he takes, and it's tempting to feel like a victim of all that, and to be a victim means, if you just look at the definition of it, it means to be powerless and feel like there's nothing you can do. And there's a certain reality to that, is that we can't reach those of us who are or more liberal or progressive or democracy minded. We don't have the levers of power in many ways. I mean, we don't. The Supreme Court is a very reactionary, conservative majority that does pretty much, well, not always, but a lot of what Trump wants. In fact, we've seen one of the latest, I I don't know what to call it exactly, with the gutting of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. That happened a few weeks ago. And that disenfranchises many black voters, most all black voters in the South. It will eliminate many, if not all, the black representatives in the South. Very much what happened after Reconstruction. And if you look at the history of Reconstruction, the time after the Civil War when Grant sent federal troops or had federal troops in the South and enforced black people being able to vote, because remember, they had just been slaves. Now they were freed. They were American citizens, enshrined in the Constitution now that they were to vote. And federal troops made sure that was possible, and there was over 1,000 representatives and local officials and were elected in the South legally, but enforced by federal troops. But as federal troops were withdrawn from the South and our politics changed and the majority culture lost interest in what was happening after the Civil War, a kind of apartheid set in the South, where black people were literally murdered, lynched, intimidated by the Ku Klux Klan, by armed groups, keeping them from voting in the South. And this kind of went on right up until the next century, and it went on more or less. It probably waned and what's the opposite of waned? It got more. Waxed and waned. And it got more or less after Reconstruction, and we're going into the 20th century. And in 1965, Lyndon Johnson, through all sorts of maneuvers, organized enough votes to pass, and very after filibusters and all sorts of maneuvers, managed to pass the 1965 Voting Rights Act, which protected black voters in the South. Now we have the gutting of that, saying that there is apparently no problem anymore and all will be well. So when I see this kind of onslaught into democracy, there's this temptation to feel victimized. And we are powerless. And this is something unique to American democracy, that we have someone who's very autocratic and who's very corrupt, who accepts massive gifts from foreign governments, who does all the things we know he does. And this seems brand new. And there's some aspects of it that are brand new. But there's many aspects of corruption that are quite old in American democracy. And I guess one of the ways I'm coping with not being a victim is to read American history and to be reminded that one of the ways there's been corruption in a lot of different places, and it's quite part of our 250 years. I mean, what's remarkable about it is how much we have confronted corruption, because most political systems are quite corrupt and have been over the centuries and the millennial. There's been every variety of military takeover, the killing of opponents, all of that has always taken place. In our country, there was, as I'm reading LBJ's a biography, it's a 4-volume thing by Caro, C-A-R-O. I recommend it to you. I'm in volume 2. And you can see there was quite a lot of corruption in Texas. And in this case, it was on the Democratic side a lot, because the Democrats used to run Texas. And there
Democrats
were,
used to run a lot of things.
they have, and they would, there were votes bought in Texas it was the 1948 Senate primary and the Democratic primary. There was a charge that Lyndon Johnson, through his connections in the oil industry and other political shenanigans, managed to buy some district votes, enough to win a very, very close election in 1948 for the Democratic nomination for the Senate. There's a charge that, and some of these things are somewhat proved, but somewhat not, that John Kennedy received some help from Mayor Daley in Chicago to win Illinois, which was another very close race for the presidency, and may have given him the presidency over Richard Nixon. And we, of course, know Richard Nixon was into burglary. So and we go back to the Teapot Dome scandal way back then. I used to hear about that in high school and in college, where political favors were bought and sold, and votes were bought and sold. And we now have the corruption in our Congress now that with Citizens United, that there's unlimited corporate spending because our Supreme Court has decided that corporations are human and have a right to free speech. So and free speech means free spending. So we have billions of dollars now flowing into politics, which is a highly corrupting influence. I don't know. What do we do about that? How do we keep from being victims of the world we're seeing around us? How do we do that? Because if we're victims, we're powerless, we're depressed, we can't take action, or we lash out and we do things that are harmful to other people, and usually victims that lash out to people around them, not the people who victimized them in the first place. So if we're going to be, and I guess the opposite of being a victim is someone that takes action in a positive way to deal with what's been handed them. And this is what we've been handed. Everybody who's listening to this, everybody in this country, everybody who's a voter, I wish everyone would vote, has been handed this situation. And we get to decide what to do with it. Because no matter what we see coming on from the federal government, we have a part to play in all this. Because power comes from the people. We is the people. We are it. There are no other people. We're it. So what do we do? What is our course of action? Not having a lot of the major reins of power, but having whatever power we do have.
Well, the position that you have generally held, we have a court system, we have legal standards, and every now and then, even under Trump, it's taken the ball quite a bit of time to get rolling down that hill. But we're starting to see some wins, and the problem with those wins is that when they get to the Supreme Court, there's a very strong likelihood that they're going to get derailed, and and any gain will fall backwards into a loss, because the Supreme Court will effectively, 6-3, 5-3 rubber stamp Trump's position. We just had an issue here recently where Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson had she had argued against Chief Justice Roberts that we are not living in a world of precedent when it comes to court decisions. And we're not, and the Supreme Court is not fully explaining itself to the lower courts. So the lower courts don't have a solid footing for how they should be making decisions. That puts us in the category of that's not fully a house divided, but that is a very clear sign that the house is divided. The legal minds cannot even agree with each other, not just in that they disagree on how the structure, well, I read the law and I heard this, and well, I read the law and I heard that. They're not even agreeing on the hierarchical structure that our judicial system has always worked on. We've gone from a Supreme Court that spoke to both the people and the courts to a Supreme Court that makes shadow docket decisions and doesn't explain itself because there is no explanation. Their position is one of supporting the current administration, not of supporting what is legal, sustainable, understandable in our country today.
Mitch, could you talk a little bit what the shadow docket is?
So the Supreme Court has a prerogative wherein when they are asked to manage a legal question, they can take it on in what is not exactly it's not exactly a short term, but they can give a fast answer against a future deeper inspection of the issue. And what we are seeing with that is that the conservative majority is taking these shadow docket cases, assigning them to their conservative majority, and making very fast decisions, very fast one-judge decisions about issues that ought to be put in front of the entire court for a lengthy discussion with representation from both sides of the issues, speaking to exactly what it is that needs to happen or what they would like to see happen. So if there is a rational argument, the judges can consider, a decision can be made, a majority decision can be written, if necessary, a dissenting minority decision can be written, and everybody will understand what both sides of the argument are and why one side was chosen over the other. And that speaks to how it will be addressed in the future. If somebody's like, well, you said in the dissent that you wanted this and that, and then in the majority they said this, and now and so I see where there's a bridge between those two things, and the law should be adjusted. But when you have a shadow docket, it's basically just someone saying, they want this and we're going to give it to them, and that's it.
How is that legal? Why is that allowed, do you think?
Well, I couldn't begin to explain to you why it is allowed. I assume it is because they only meet, they have their big black robe get together in the spring, and then they deliver a bunch of they speak to a bunch of lawyers over a bunch of issues, and then they tend to deliver decisions on those spring meetings in the fall. And when you only have major decisions sort of coming forward once a year, you have to have some sort of time to get together on those other issues. And I think that's sort of where things started going on the shadow docket. And the problem is that they're not coming back for further and deeper discussion, and they're being addressed even in the shadow docket context without an explanation of why things are being allowed to happen. So lower courts, seeing the same problem from multiple different places, can't get an understanding of why something the current administration allowed through was allowed through. They only know that there are other precedents that disagree, and they're not being given enough information to argue either way. So then it's eventually going to come back to the court, and they're going to go, we already made a judgment on that on the shadow docket, and the courts have been saying, well, yes, you did, but you didn't tell us why. And because you didn't tell me why, I already have a precedent to work from. And now the Supreme Court's getting to a point where it says, oh, well, no, we told you that it's wrong, so it's just wrong. You don't need an explanation. We've already given you the precedent because we made a decision.
And yet we didn't. Only probably one justice made that decision, right?
Well,
After
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah,
was,
and
but it was
so-
made as part of the current conservative majority that doesn't really seem to have a whole lot of standards for how they make decisions.
So in many ways, it's a way to make radical change very quickly.
Very true.
That's contrary to precedent. That if you want to, if you really want to change something, if you can get it through on the shadow docket, you can do that without, and not really not much of a hearing, because there is no hearing. Because the courts, we hear the arguments. The court's arguments now are available by, I think they're not by television, they're by just auditory now, I think. They're just,
Yeah, I've
you-
never seen it. If there is a video, I've never seen it. I have listened to arguments.
it's very interesting to listen to the arguments.
It actually is, yes.
Listen to who is saying what, and you can see the obvious. There's just a very, very strong bias in favor of overturning a lot of the precedents from Clarence Thomas and Alito and Gorsuch. They're very much in their very, very strong reactionary approaches to undoing civil rights. We know Clarence Thomas, interestingly
Right.
enough, is interested in undoing gay marriage, and many, many reactionary approaches. And
Well,
it's- yeah,
no, and as far as overturning a precedent, I don't think there's anything wrong with overturning a precedent. You're gonna look back on the law and see where people were wrong. The turn of the century, moving into Jim Crow laws, we went through 40 years of arguing what decisions we had made, and over the course of the next 60 years, we have gone in another direction, and we've recognized that the Constitution being a flawed document, but one intended to speak to the betterment of all people, it has holes, it has gaps, but it does lean in one direction, and it leans toward the freedom of the individual. And so, we from time to time do have to revisit decisions that we made in the light of the modern world, and make adjustments. And right now we are going backwards in those adjustments. And it's not that it is wrong that we're doing it. It's wrong that we're doing it, again, like I said, as you said, with the shadow docket thing, it's unilateral, and we're not making decisions. And since we can't explain the decision, we cannot say whether that decision is in keeping with the spirit of the Constitution, but it seems very much that it is not.
well, the argument is being made by MAGA and the MAGA judges, if we can call them that. I don't know what to call them exactly. The very reactionary right-wing folks on the Supreme Court. Their argument is that they're interpreting the Constitution as originalists, that somehow they're channeling the thought processes of the founding fathers. That the founding fathers, well, I mean, if you follow that argument, you could say, well, the founding fathers didn't exactly expect black people to be free either. Although even at the Constitutional Convention, there was much talk about freeing the slaves. That was
Well,
there,
and
but it was
would
decided not to because politically it was not possible. Or maybe, I don't know if it was.
Well, I would argue that they did. I would argue that they did want the slaves to eventually be freed. But we have this never-ending problem of when we are benefiting from the structure of the law, we don't want it to change right now under us. The idea that all of the founding fathers had slaves and didn't want to lose them. The idea that even when they didn't want to lose them, at the end of their lives, I mean, I cannot think of one of our founding fathers who is noted to have freed his slaves, even upon his own death. Not Franklin, not Washington, not
Well, okay, that's a
not
good question. I
Jefferson.
thought,
Definitely not Jefferson.
Not Jefferson, Washington freed some of his slaves, but I don't know if
Uh,
he freed all of them.
uh,
Did Franklin have slaves? I don't know.
Franklin did have slaves. He kept them until his death. Jefferson, okay, excuse me, Washington did have, if we assume that he did have slaves that he freed, he did not free them all. He had
No.
slaves that he left into the care of his wife, who was apparently not the kindest woman on earth. Uh, so yeah, one way or the other, we have that problem that people don't want to, they're unwilling to lose their own position to support the law. It's okay if somebody's going to fix it 20 years after I'm dead, and I'll give you the tools you need to do that 20 years after I'm dead. But I don't want to get poorer. I don't want to have to do my own laundry. I don't, I need a footman. I need somebody to answer my doors. And if I have to pay them to do that, that's going to take away from money that I could use
It's all
to,
about money, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. Uh,
Slavery was the economy of a vast portion of the 13 states. Not in Massachusetts and not in New York so much, but in most of the other states there was slavery was holding everything together. I mean, one of the reasons America was so rich was because of slavery. Free labor. I mean, and they were valued as commodities, and so if we go by and then the Supreme Court supported those precedents. So if we go back to originalist thinking, hell, we should still have slavery, shouldn't we?
yes.
Yeah.
And well, along with a great many other things, weaponry isn't, women don't vote. Women are effectively still property right alongside slaves, just a little higher up. Uh,
Gay folk are hanged.
the economy as we know it now does not function on the Constitution of 1776, 1780, 1790. It doesn't the circumstances that we live under now are not those. You cannot be an originalist because the world does not exist that way anymore. The Constitution was written, well, we feel that the Constitution was written to be open and flexible because they knew circumstances were going to change. I would hate to think they were just lazy and left it full of weird gaps and fillable holes. I would like to think that, yeah, I live in Arkansas, and our legislature can't write a law to save its life. We went through 3 rounds of legislation to try to come up with effective concealed carry laws. And they just kept making them worse and worse to the point that they just said, okay, screw it. Everybody is allowed to concealed carry. Everybody is allowed to open carry. And as far as the courts are concerned, unless you think somebody is about to commit a crime, just leave everybody alone. I no
Well,
longer
so that
remember
you don't have
I
stand
no
your
longer
ground.
remember what the gaps were in the first 2 attempts. I just know that they effectively, like
Yeah.
in the first 2 attempts, they started out by writing it in such a way that it was almost impossible for anyone to have rights to a gun. And then in the second version, they had inadvertently blocked out like it was almost like saying no one white and male can have a gun. There was some error in the system in the way they had written it that blocked out a majority of the population, but not the majority they would want to not have guns. Uh, so yeah, we now live in a state where, and as you have seen, there are states that are currently arguing that there are most states have laws that say, oh well, you can't carry a firearm into a federal courthouse. And we're now seeing states that are arguing that, basically saying, I can't carry, you just can't tell me where I can and cannot carry a firearm. It is my right as a citizen of the United States to carry a weapon to defend myself from whomever, wherever, particularly people in the federal courthouse. So, I
And
would
the
like to
founding
think,
fathers never anticipated that we would have semi-automatic and automatic weapons, and that we would have weapons with bullets. I mean, there were no bullets. There were
well, musket ball's a bullet. I mean, it's a ball. I guess technically a bullet is a slug that sits on top of a pre-chambered charge. But no, no, no. I mean, one way or the other. The founding fathers understood that we were going to be upset with one another, that the government would eventually overstep itself, and that we as the people would have to step in to fix them. In the end, that is what the right to bear arms is all about. You cannot have an unarmed population contesting an armed federal government. So it doesn't matter what weapons you're doing it with. It is rational to think I do not need any of my neighbors to have a tank. I do not need any of my neighbors to have a mortar. I do not need any of my neighbors to be able to build a nuclear weapon in their garage and deploy it when they are good and damn ready. Um, but I do expect that if I walk into my neighbor's house, he may intend to dissuade me at the end of a barrel. He could do it with a bat, he could do it with a sword, he could do it with a ninja star. He could shuriken me all day long. How he chooses to do it is not as important as what reason did I give him to do it. So, and we run into that same issue with the federal government, rather, and that's the issue with the federal government. We now have a federal government that is looking to weaken all of our constitutional rights so that it can do what it wants. And you can't have, and some, it's an old statement, and I've been seeing it re-spoken lately, but you can't have rights that someone can take away from you. If someone can take it away from you, it's not a right, it's just a privilege they're allowing you this 4 years. We should be so far beyond these assaults on our constitutional rights, our recognized human rights, the basic expectations that everyone should have from the moment they open their eyes to the moment they close. And it doesn't matter if your eyes are closed, you still have rights.
Well, and
Everyone,
that was clear in the founding fathers, that we needed a Bill of Rights, not a bill of possibilities, not a bill of we wish we hads, but a Bill of Rights. And those, they're not absolute, but they're pretty strong. They're very, very strong.
they are
So the
pretty
federal,
strong.
so why would the federal government now, under the current administration, want to undermine those rights? I mean, one way to undermine them is to flood the zone, have people give up and not assert their rights. Okay, so you don't speak out. You become discouraged and don't vote. We're going to run for local election, you decide not to. Those are all rights that you have. Or you decide not, you just advertise again, another No Kings rally is coming this month.
Mm.
You can decide not to go. You could, because you're afraid. So you don't exercise your rights to assembly. You don't speak out on the internet because you're afraid to be targeted. You give up your right to free speech. You're a religious minority. You're Muslim or what would be the other, or Jewish or the wrong kind of Christian, and you don't speak up. Or you're an atheist and you don't speak up and say that you don't believe in God. You don't, you give up your right, your freedom of religion then. It seems to me the only way we're going to really give up, we're going to lose those rights is if we give them up. And we have a right to vote if you're a citizen, you know.
Well, okay, well, and yeah, you have a right to vote. Again, that is the point you were just saying. Why do they want to do these things? Why are they in this process? And that quite literally is it. They do not want us to vote as a conservative. Honestly, I would say as a conservative minority. The Republicans are a conservative minority in
Are
this
they even
country.
conservative though? I think they're more
Oh yes,
reactionary.
they couldn't be. They could not be more violently conservative if their lives depended on it.
Well,
Uh,
but conservative as I know it is the preserving of traditional institutions, and they're directly attacking traditional institutions. But go ahead, anyway.
And that speaks to the idea that those traditional institutions have gone too far. Women do not need to vote. That is a tradition of of how many generations back?
Founding
But it
fathers.
once upon a time it was a conservative expectation that we choose who is going to have power, and we don't need just any old body willy-nilly making decisions. We need reasonable people, people who have shown themselves to be of value should be voting. We can't just let every Tom, Dick, and Harry do this.
White people with property. Yes.
We had expectations of, well, religion's religion, but some religion's just silly, and we don't need to allow all religions. We're just going to allow the ones we like or make sense. Which, when you go far enough back into, English history, English law, there was a time when that was the case, and even they got over that stupidity. And I guess once you get past the 60s, we sort of started to come to terms with that, and we were moving in the direction of understanding that women's rights need to be. We started after the 60s to recognize that that the rights of the Bill of Rights are human rights, and they are not about any one group or any one sex or any one race or any one gender. If you have a heartbeat, you have an expectation of these rights. Not that I've ever heard anybody in power really say it that way, but they should.
But the
All of
founding
these rights
fathers,
apply to all of us as people, because if you are people,
yeah.
these are your rights.
And
Uh,
it's enshrined in the Constitution that slaves are, what are they, three-fifths human?
well, okay, so there's an argument to be had there. Yes, for not for a period of time, we had the context that if you were a slave, you were three-fifths of a person. But um, if you are three-fifths of a person, they cannot exploit you in the same way in a slavery situation for your value. If you say every slave is counted the same as a person, but you don't give them their individual rights, you just say you count them as a person, but they don't get a person's rights, then you are giving power to the slave owner. It's the same situation like we have people right now saying the most inane stuff about, well, everybody doesn't need to be able to vote. The head of household needs to be able to vote, but the head of household should have one vote for every person who lives in their home. so my wife can't vote, but I can vote in her stead. I have 4 sons, 3 daughters, and I'm doing my best to crank out as many more of those as possible because I want to be a 10-vote household so that I individually have 10 votes. None of them count as people. The boys will one day count as people, but only once they are the head of a household. Until then, I am the voting power. Um, it's that same sort of context. So with slavery, it was the same sort of thing. You could not use them to that full benefit until you gave them the full context of their vote and allowed them to be people. And even after we did that, even after we ran out of ways to stop them from voting legally, we found ways to keep black people away from the polls. That is all of Mississippi, Alabama.
And are we starting to do that again?
Yes, and we're moving back
So
toward
that's
that.
the-
We're moving
that's-
back toward minimizing people in groups that make us uncomfortable. Okay, so we just had the situation this week where Hegseth brought out that we removed 180 religions from the recognized faiths that the military chaplains manage. And I've looked at the list, and it's like the direct assault is sort of questionable because really what they're trying to say is no, we didn't remove them, we consolidated them. We consolidated them. So like it has Orthodox churches have all been compressed into one section that says Orthodox. But you can't do that because
Orthodox anything? Oh, that's interesting. I like to see that one.
yeah, because the Jewish Orthodoxy and the Greek Orthodoxy have nothing to do with one another. And if you compress all of the Muslim faiths into just one box that says Muslim, well, you've got Shia and Sunni who absolutely don't agree on a lot of basics. And you've moved the Sikhs. The Sikhs are actually still listed separately, but they're not listed as Muslim. They're just listed as Sikhs. So you've and then like the big argument right now is that the Mormon Church was moved out of a box that listed it as among Christian faiths. It's just a separate faith outside of those, which is just telling them, well, we don't believe you're Christians because we didn't categorize you that way. So we've gotten to a point where they are stupid enough to think that they have gotten enough control that they can start cannibalizing their own. And because like this is Trump did this in 2016, 2017, 2018 when he came to the office. He's the one that started this conversation about how do we have these faiths organized, and is everybody getting their due? And now he's gone back to it by allowing the people around him, people like Hegseth, to actively start attacking the same people who have supported him up to this point, who got him where he is, which speaks to the whole idea that what he's really planning to do is not allow anybody ever to vote again, and he doesn't need those people anymore. So yeah, he's at a point right now where he's cannibalizing the people who should be voting for him in November and beyond. And I mean, he's basically just pissed away Utah. And how many more religion and how many more faiths who supported him is he going to lose because they see the way that list has been changed?
But then he's not going to, maybe he's not going to run again. Because why? Because he'll be president for life. He'll just declare himself president for life and say, I think I just want to do the will of the people. And it's more important than the Constitution is not, because he's not really very much into the Constitution, is he? So
he's not much into the law, period.
no, laws,
It's all about
Constitution.
yeah,
He doesn't
it's what
like
he
the
can get away
military
with,
too
not
much
what the
either.
law says.
Unless you're blowing the military is for blowing things up. So anyway, so how do we stay engaged and active in the midst of an authoritarian government like this that's trying to erode rights? So there's a saying that all politics is local, and I think there's a very much a truth to that. Is what can you do with what's around you, immediately around you? Some of the things that I do, for instance, I used to, and this is, maybe I'll go back to this, but right now, I used to consider Republican candidates I wouldn't consider that absolutely disqualifying, but now I do in California because of the nature of the Republican Party. I'm sure there's some very good local candidates who are Republican, but I haven't found any yet because they're also enthralled to the national government. So I will look on, we have a number of nonpartisan, supposedly nonpartisan elections here in California for judges, for commissioners, for for supervisors. Supervisors in Orange County and LA County are extremely powerful people, and they're elected, but they're nonpartisan. So I research now everybody that I vote for and see what their partisan affiliation is, and most of them reveal it in other ways, because that MAGA approach now is highly destructive of our local governments as well as our national government, and that's certainly it's certainly become true in California. So I will do that, and I go to all the No Kings rallies, even though I don't think No Kings is going to change everything. But it does keep us connected to other people who feel at least some of the ways we do about democracy, and keeps our spirits up. And we are visible. We're visible to people who drive by. We're visible on the national stage to some extent. And someday we will be more of a political force too, where we can organize in voting and look for candidates. I mean, right now it's pretty clear who the pro-democracy candidates are now, but there's also discrimination within the Democratic Party and between Democrats and more mainline Democrats and progressives. You know, there's a progressive wing which has much more of a social consciousness than mainstream Democrats do, and I think much more of an economic message, which is really valuable at this time. But what else can we do, Mitch? What else can we do to keep from falling into the depression of being victims? What are you doing?
I'm not doing anything.
That's not true. You're doing this. So, yeah,
No, that's defiance in and of itself is not doing anything. Um, well, okay, so what you were saying, what you were just saying, effectively, all of this is showing people that they have a community, that they're not alone, that there are people they could look to for support when things get bad. But it is sort of the weakness of the Democratic Party liberal progressive position that we're not going to throw the first punch. We're going to look to reason before we do anything else. And by the time we have decided that reason is not going to work, we've already been punched in the face 15 or 16 times. And the end result of that tends to be that we're not in a position to defend ourselves or the rights that we're talking about as well as we would have if we had blocked that first punch and punched back. Um, we also tend to be the marginalized, less vocal group of people, because what we want, the things that we consider to be, we're able to take advantage of those human rights aspects because we are doing things that are not part of the norm. The majority of the population is not doing what we are doing. They are not living our lives the way we are living our lives, which is how we know all these rights are supposed to be available to everybody, because I'm not doing what you do, but I still deserve to be able to do something. Their position is you're not doing what we do, so you're not supposed to be doing it. Do what we do. Be like us. And there's not exactly, it's not automatic that there's something wrong because you want people to be like you. I was having a discussion with one of our listeners, actually, one of our listeners who's there right now, KPG Hardy. We were having that discussion of there are lots of countries that are homogenous, and they do well in their homogeneity. That isn't us. We are not a country built on one race, one religion, one religion, one geography, one political outlook. Our strength is and has always been that we will steal the best idea available and ride that thing into the ground until we find a better idea. And that idea is going to come from gay people, members of the LGBTQ community. That idea is going to come from women. That idea is going to come from children. That idea is going to come from people not even in our country who we can trick into coming here and giving us their idea. That idea is going to come from people of every religion. It is going to come from people who live in deserts and on top of mountains and on the coastline. And you can't just say only people who served in the military get a say. Only people whose families make more than $1 million a year get a say. Only people who are Catholic get a say. Only people with one leg get a say. Everybody has to have a say for this country to run at its absolute best, and it has always run at its absolute best when we recognize that everybody has an input. Everybody has to, you got to educate all the kids, because you don't know which kid is going to be the one that gives you the next world-changing idea. Somebody was saying just the other day, and it's an old statement, but again, they all are. Somebody was saying just the other day that we do not know how many Einsteins have died in a field in India because they didn't have the chance to be educated. We don't know how many Kennedys died on a mountaintop in Appalachia because they never had the education or the opportunity to bring their ideas to the population. There are. We are one of the most advanced and fortunate countries on the face of the earth. And for some reason, the people who have the most benefit from that are doing their flat out best to deny anybody else an opportunity to come up and help move the country forward, move them forward, move their opportunities forward along with the individual. They would rather stagnate this country and rot in a vault full of money than look to the well-being of the next generation.
And maybe not even realizing that one of the reasons we're so rich and so well off is because of that diversity you're talking about. Is because of these wonderful ideas. I mean, look at what diversity has brought us. It's brought these ideas.
Well, yeah, but we minimize those things. That's part of the current attack on education. That's part of the fact that we are
Yeah.
right now trying to deprioritize teaching as a profession. We need these children to be stupid. We need them to not know what women have done in this country, what they do every day. They need to not think that, they need to not recognize that anything good ever came from anywhere but here, came from anybody but white people, came from anybody who is not Christian. We do not need the people in this country. And I was just complaining about this the other day. You have propaganda arms of the conservative party like PragerU making their way into our schools with shifty, outright lies, vague misinformation that makes children that, and we already went through that. I was raised in that generation where the truth was sort of starting to come out, but it hadn't yet.
Yeah.
And now we're trying to shift. Now we're trying to push that knowledge back in. That genie's out of the bottle, but they're managing to stuff it back in, which isn't supposed to be possible. You're not supposed to be able to unring a bell, but somehow we are managing it. We are forcing out. We are cranking
Well,
out a generation of
yeah.
ignorance, and
If you
and
if you
and we
can't
know it.
read,
That's the worst part. We know we are
yeah.
making them ignorant.
Yeah, it's if you ban the books or make the child unable to read because you don't teach them how to read, or you allow all learning to be online, then it's very hard to exchange ideas then, very difficult. And well, I think the reactionary folks understand that. MAGA understands that. Ignorant people will follow Donald Trump because you don't have to think and you don't have to reflect on history. Look, Donald Trump became president. He hasn't got a clue what went on in history. I guess he knew about World War II. I don't know what else he knew about.
He does not know about World War II. He does not know. He does not know about anything. There is not a single facet of human life, interaction, emotion that doesn't have to do with property that he understands. And he doesn't, he only understands that to no, you know what? Never mind. I guess that's it. That's it. He understands property. He
Well,
doesn't
he's
understand
not very
human
good at that
interaction.
either.
Huh?
He wasn't very good at that either. He
He
doesn't.
wasn't very good at it, but it's the closest thing to anything he understands.
It's something he does know. Yeah. So we all have an opportunity to show up about this, though. I guess that's my hope in all of this is that we keep showing up in our classrooms, and you're in a classroom. I keep showing up in my community. I go to No Kings. I vote. I'm too old to run for office, or I might do that. Oh, I'm on a board for Orange County Al-Anon. See, we do things that are of service. And what greater service is there than to work with children? And
Oh,
and to say things that they don't understand at all, but they hear them, Mitch. They hear what you're saying,
yeah.
and that goes in there and it sits somewhere. And if
Well,
they,
but they're all equal. They're all equal. Teachers, nurses, doctors, members of the military community, social workers, everybody. Even in his way, even Trump is giving to the country. When we finish stomping him out, and finish stomping out the fires that he is setting, we will hopefully have set up a series of corrections, directional corrections that will serve us for 100 years. But actually, it'll have to serve us for more than 100 years because it's probably going to take us 20 or 40 to fix all of this ignorance. And then hopefully we can make changes that will allow us to not have to come back to this space again, because we got out of this space 60 years ago, and it took us 60 years before that to set it up. We can't just keep cycling through these same mistakes. At some point, we have to enshrine that certain things are just true, and you can't legislate them away, because you can't legislate away human rights.
amen, amen, and amen. We thank you for joining us today on Halo Love and Country. We hope you are exercising your rights, whether you agree with Mitch or I, and particularly if you don't agree. Please comment, like or don't like us. It's fine. Subscribe or unsubscribe from us because you are free on this channel to speak and to be with us, and we hope you'll choose to be with us. We want you to go see the movie Love and Country. It's on Tubi and Amazon and Roku, I think it's called, or Deku it's called, and a couple of other places. You can also promote the book again. Here we go, Love and Country. This is the novel based on the movie, or the movie's based on the
Prequel.
novel's
Book's a prequel.
based on, it was written after the movie. So, and we hope you'll join us again. We're here live, and we're here on YouTube. And Mitch sends us all kinds of different places around the internet. You may see us. So, thanks for